And man, it was just an amazing amount of trust. And the only reason I did it, Eric, was because I had to. And I think the reason a lot of leaders don't is because they don't have to. They're not in a position, their backs aren't up against a wall where there's just not enough margin. But I learned a valuable lesson by force. People are capable of a lot more than we give them credit.
Welcome to the Innovative Church Leaders Podcast, where we help you experience and bring renewal to your mission field. Join us and receive free resources at innovativechurchleaders.org. On today's episode of the Innovative Church Leaders Podcast, I'm excited to have with me Jon Chasteen. How are you doing, Jon?
I'm good, Eric, man. Thanks for having me on. It's an honor.
Well, it's really exciting for me. I've heard your story. We had an epic meal together a week or so ago. It was so fun just getting to hear some of what God is doing in you and through you. You're a pastor at Victory Church, but you also have something called ReLeaders. I want to spend some time talking about ReLeader because I feel like there's a lot of our listeners who are praying for, looking for, wanting revitalization. Maybe talk a little bit about ReLeader, and then of course we'll talk about Victory as well, but start with ReLeader.
Yeah, it came out of a conversation I had with a pastor friend of mine who was inviting me to help him do some roundtables for pastors that were launching churches or planting churches. I just said, man, I don't know how to do that. I've never planted a church. I took over a church from a predecessor and on the heels of a moral failure. And then I just started thinking about my patterns of my life and higher education and sales and just all through the decades of my life. And I saw a pattern. I'd never started something or planted something. I'd always restarted something. And so out of that just birthed this idea that I really believe that there's leaders that are entrepreneurial, that'll launch and start and grow. And then there's a whole nother subset of us that I have coined the term ReLeaders that aren't leaders at all, that we come on the heels of predecessors, whether it's a president or a doctor or a lawyer or a teacher or any of those sort of things. You're not a leader, you're a ReLeader. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, and talk about that because obviously I bet the people following you consider you a leader worth following. But I think what you're getting at is there's like certain skills that you seem to be able to pull out when you need them. I mean, because there's a lot of change management, I imagine, in the midst of this. Talk a little bit about more of that.
Yeah, so ReLeaders, they inherited things. They inherited buildings, they've inherited staff, they've inherited systems, they've inherited culture. I didn't hire these people. I didn't set these core values. And so you're coming in, you're either coming in on the heels of a great leader, which has its own challenges because you're constantly compared to your predecessor, or you're coming on the heels of a terrible leader or a devastating situation. And each one of those has a unique recovery process, but it's just a different set of skills. When you're launching something, there's energy, there's excitement, there's new vision, and there's momentum. And many times as ReLeaders, you're picking up the pieces of brokenness and trying to bring healing or trying to build trust. And so it's harder to get momentum because you're too busy trying to find healing and trust to cast new vision. It takes a process.
Well, if we step into a very difficult situation there, Victory, what were some of the ways you've developed trust, regained trust, built trust, and were able to start moving things forward? Talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, so in 2014, I took the helm of a church as the lead pastor where the founding pastor of 20 years had a moral failure and infidelity. And we had multiple campuses and 30 to 40% drop in attendance and giving. And so you're in the process of trying to recover financially, you're trying to recover spiritually, we're trying to recover relationally and in your leadership. And it takes trust. And it's hard to lead without trust. And, there's an old saying that says you gain trust by the spoonful and lose it by the bucketful. And ReLeaders many times are picking up a bucket that's empty, that's been tipped over. And so I think the first thing is to know that it takes time. There is no magic bullet. There's no magic pill. It is doing the right things for the right reasons for a really long time. And that's pastoring in a lot of ways. And so there's a process to that. And There's a lot of different ways to do that, practically speaking and theoretically speaking. But really, if I was going to boil it down to something really simple, just do what you say you're going to do over and over and over and over again. Yeah, it takes a really long time.
Well, and it's been really beautiful even hearing about your being invited to places all over the world to help others kind of learn how to build that trust, learn how to re-lead in those situations. What are some of the other things you're helping these other pastors discern and discover?
I think honestly, Eric, one of the biggest things leaders, particularly re-leaders, need is just encouragement. Most of the time, they're on the right path. Most of the time, they have leadership instincts and they're doing the right things, but you don't see the needle move as quick. And so, there's lots of re-leaders in Scripture. Joshua was a re-leader after Moses, and Elisha was a re-leader after Elijah. But in particularly, Zerubbabel was a re-leader. He came to rebuild what he didn't break. And when King Nebuchadnezzar tore down the temple, Zerubbabel came to rebuild it. And it says in the book of Ezra and Haggai, it's all throughout many of these texts, but Zerubbabel rebuilt the foundation and became very discouraged and actually quit. Theologians, historians believe that he built the foundation and quit for between 15 to 17 years, walked away. And Zechariah chapter 4 is a lot of prophetic words from the prophet Zechariah coming to Zerubbabel saying, you will finish what you started. And it's verses like, despise not small beginnings, for the Lord rejoices to see the work begin. That is a word to Zerubbabel to finish the temple. Verses like, it's not by might, it's not by power, it's by my spirit, says the Lord. These were all scriptures given to re-leaders because re-leading is discouraging. Sometimes I say that, one of the biggest attended church weekends in our church history was the weekend that we announced the moral failure. I mean, people just packed the house to hear the drama. And I always say, people go to the NASCAR races to watch the crash, but very few people stay back to watch them rebuild the car. Somebody has to rebuild that car for the race. And that's what re-leaders do. It's not glamorous. Re-leaders' names aren't in lights. Everyone knows who Solomon is, but not a lot of people know who Zerubbabel is.
Yeah.
And so a lot of that work is just trying to encourage pastors and leaders that you are on the right path. You are doing the right things and giving them the encouragement they need to keep going, because re-leading is a marathon, not a sprint.
That phrase, Zerubbabel came in to rebuild what he didn't break. Maybe talk about the level of humility, guiding people through forgiveness, overcoming bitterness. How much of that was part of what happened at Victory and what you're helping other pastors do?
It's a massive part, man. I mean, one of the most difficult parts of re-leading for me was the staff. There was everybody that was going to leave in the congregation left. They didn't think about it. They just left. And those that remained in the congregation at least had some level of trust and they were ready to move forward. The staff were hurting. They were in agony. And it reminded me of the children of Israel whenever they were on the banks of the Jordan River. They were about to go into the promised land, and the Lord took them through a process of circumcision. And the Bible says they stayed where they were until they healed. And I think it's another component, an aspect of re-leading that's really important, because if we're not careful as leaders, we get very ambitious, because leaders are leaders. We want to move, we want to go quickly. But one of the worst things a leader can do is try to make a bunch of wounded soldiers go to battle. The staff were wounded, they were hurting, they were reeling. And so we just had to sit in that pain for a season and acknowledge it and not try to sweep it under the rug and pretend like it wasn't there, because there was real pain, there was real betrayal. And so there was a process to that. Whenever a couple of years ago, there was a parking garage that kind of fell in New York City, and several people were hurt and several people died. And I'm sure at some point they were going to rebuild that thing. But before they did, they sent in EMT to recover bodies and to find hurt people. And that's the thing with re-leading. You can't just go straight to rebuilding. You got to do some trauma work first. And I think a lot of pastoring is like that, not just for re-leaders, but trying to find the wounded and find the hurting. And it's not glamorous work. Nehemiah was another re-leader. He built what he didn't break. Nebuchadnezzar tore down the walls that protected the temple, and it grieved Nehemiah. And there was nothing glamorous about what Nehemiah did. He literally stacked rocks. I mean, he put one rock on top of the other and built a wall. That's not glamorous work, and usually re-leading isn't, but it's important work. I can't remember what year it was, Eric. I think it was 2021, may have been 2022. Barnett said that we planted 3,000 churches in America, and I'm all for church planting. Our church helps plant churches. We just helped plant one in Lawton, Oklahoma. But in the same year, 4,500 churches closed. So we don't just need church planting. We need church revitalization. We need re-leaders to understand who they are and know that they're empowered to do it and specifically gifted to do a particular type of leadership and step into those roles to keep these churches from dying.
Well, if that's you, you're in that position or you're feeling called into that position, I highly recommend ReLeader.co. Talk a little bit about Victory. It was 2014 that you took over Victory.Church there in Oklahoma. Talk about where you're at now and some of the important steps of how you got there.
Yeah. So it's a great church founded by a great pastor. I mean, his legacy continues. Pastor Mark Crow was an amazing man. He planted an amazing church, and we carry on part of his legacy. One mistake doesn't negate a man or a woman's entire lifetime of ministry. And so it's a great church. It's a multi-site church. We have campuses in Oklahoma City. And then we, as of late, have a brand new campus in DFW, Texas, in the Dallas-Fort Worth metro area. And it took us, that sounds amazing and it sounds glamorous, but we probably took us 4 to 5 years to truly pull up, to use the analogy of an airplane going down. We pulled up on that yoke for 3 or 4 years and really had to grind and really had to cut budgets and really had to tighten our belt. But it took us that long to change the culture and to shift the narrative. And when something like that happens, a church gets a reputation in the community in which it is. And it just takes a long obedience in the same direction, to use Eugene Peterson's words. But now we see the fruitfulness of that, and our church is stronger and bigger than it's ever been. And we could not be more proud of that work, to continue the legacy of Pastor Mark Crow and the work that God's done through this amazing church. So we just feel honored to be some small part of what God's doing in his broader church.
Well, along the way, you ended up, if I remember right, moving to Dallas, leading a school while also pastoring the church. I want to talk about, what was it that you guys did intentionally to get the staff and volunteers ready to lead at that kind of level where they're not needing you there even in the same state?
Yeah, no, it's really good. So my background is higher ed. Before I was ever a pastor, I never wanted to be a pastor, to be honest with you. It was never in the cards. And I was a VP at a university for years. And I won't bore you with the story, but lo and behold, here I come. I've become a pastor of a church. Well, all of my degrees are in higher ed. I mean, my doctorate degree is in university administration. And because I wanted to be the president of a school one day. So in 2018, the King's University in Dallas called and wanted me to be the president of the university and seminary. And the Lord was in it. And so we did it, moved to Texas. And I remember very vividly going to my pastor and saying, "Hey, I'm not sure if these executive pastors are ready. I don't know if they can carry the weight of the church." And I'll never forget what he said. He said, "You know what the problem is?" I said, "No." He said, "You are. You're their lid. You've always been their lid, because they honor you and they respect you. They will always come under your covering. And as soon as you step to the side, in a sense, and truly empower them to run the day-to-day of the church, you'll never fully know what they're capable of." And so I did just that. I remember meeting with them, and I've known these guys for several years. We finish each other's sentences. These are guys I trust completely, and I know they're in the right roles. But before I left, I said, "Guys, I don't want to ever hear a story about you guys saying in a meeting, 'Let me talk to Jon and I'll get back with you.' Just make a decision. Just make a decision. And you know what decisions you need to bring to me, and you know what decisions you can just pull the trigger on. I fully trust you. And there's really nothing you could do on purpose to derail the church with a decision on a graphic or a decision on adding a service or whatever those little things may be. And man, it was just an amazing amount of trust. And the only reason I did it, Eric, was because I had to.
Right.
And I think the reason a lot of leaders don't is because they don't have to. You know, they're not in a position, their backs aren't up against a wall where there's just not enough margin. But I learned a valuable lesson by force. Was people are capable of a lot more than we give them credit. If you have the right person that you trust, right, and you see capacity in them, you'll never fully know their capabilities until you get out of their way. Well, that's what I would say.
It's a beautiful story, and I think you're so right. Maybe to be real practical, if you could give us a few things, like what are the absolute items you want to be involved in, rather than listing all the ones you're not. But I'd just love to hear just a few of those.
Yeah. I think anything having to do with vision for the future. If you're the visionary leader, then vision can only come from you. And so when it comes to directives in the church context, there may be business leaders listening to your podcast, but in the church context, it definitely involves any sort of future campus expansion. It involves any sort of major financial decisions. One of my executive pastors was our CFO. And so no one knows the finances better than him. And so we had parameters even at our elder board where I can make certain decisions up to a certain dollar amount, and then our executive team can make certain decisions, dollar amount together. And so a lot of those systems were in place formally when it comes to financial decisions. But when it comes to sermon series, if it came to any sort of construction at any of our campuses, any of those sort of things, I was certainly going to be brought in if it involved any sort of an executive, I would say campus pastor or above. As far as hiring or firing, I wanted to be involved in that. If we needed to let go a 3 or 4 layers down in the organization, I don't need to know that. I don't need to know that we're hiring someone 3 or 4 layers down in the organization. And so a lot of those decisions were just pushed down deeper into the organization. And again, people are going to make mistakes, right? They're going to do silly things. They may hire the wrong person. We may do the wrong graphic. We may do the wrong decision on a service time, but very few things that people do can't be undone. And very few things people would do would cause a major problem. I would say I was brought in on any major sicknesses or deaths in our congregation. I still want to be a pastor. I don't want to just be a leader, right? I want to be a pastor. I want to care. I want to be involved in people in our church. And so I would say those are just a few examples of areas. Yeah.
Very helpful. Well, I love to hear your story. Again, it was wonderful meeting you and just being so encouraged and inspired by you. ReLeader.co, Victory.church. Jon, thank you so much for your encouragement. Keep up the great work.
Thank you, Eric. It's an honor to be here.
Thanks for listening to the Innovative Church Leaders Podcast. Be sure to subscribe and share as we bring spirit-led innovation, reach new people, and make disciples who make disciples. Be sure to sign up for our email newsletter at innovativechurchleaders.org for free resources and an opportunity to join a cohort with Dr. N.T. Wright.